on an even more personal level, in 2007, when I was coaching at Virginia Military Institute, I'd been a head coach for about 3 years at that point. My team was about 20 minutes away from beating Coastal Carolina for the first time in school history. And this is something that every recruit had been talked to about. The team was excited about. We had a great week of training, and we were winning 2-0. And in the second half, and by the conclusion of the game, bottom line, we lost 3-2 in double overtime. And our team picked up 2 red cards and 6 yellow cards. And I think that was a defining moment in my journey as a coach.
Welcome to the Cutting Edge Coaching Podcast, where we believe coaches are some of the most important teachers and leaders in the world, and they deserve to be supported. I'm your host, Luke Gromer, and every week we're bringing you conversations with coaches, experts, and leaders from across sports that will give you practical ideas and strategies that you can apply in your coaching to develop high-performing teams and high-character people. Coaches, I'm excited to welcome Ben Freakley to the podcast. Ben is currently the Vice President of Performance and Wellbeing at University of Health and Performance, and was previously the head of mental performance for the Major League Baseball team, the Toronto Blue Jays. Ben has coached individuals, athletes, teams, soldiers, and businesses on the psychology of performance, leadership, team dynamics, and well-being. Along the way, Ben has been an NCAA Division I men's soccer coach, mental performance coach for Special Operation Forces, and general manager for a sports club with over 1,100 members. He is a certified mental performance coach and member of the Association for Applied Sports Psychology. Ben holds master's degrees in sports psychology and sports management from Georgia Southern University, where he was an NCAA Division I athlete. He is currently pursuing a doctoral degree in sport and performance psychology with an emphasis in clinical mental health counseling. In part one of our conversation, we talk about Ben's journey of change and growth as a coach, creating with your team, accountability, and improving your in-game coaching. Like always, if you enjoyed the episode and want to grab a copy of the free podcast notes, just go to cuttingedgecoach.com/podcast or click the link in the show details to download a free PDF from this episode or any episode. And coaches, it's not too late to grab access to our summer coaching series. The SES includes 10 weekly presentations plus 2 bonus sessions with coaches and experts from across sports. The event is already underway, but you can purchase access and get all of the previous video replays, live access to all upcoming sessions, a private podcast feed with audio-only replays from every session, and detailed coaching notes. Week 4 takes place on June 22nd at 12 p.m. Central Time and features Alan Keane, Great Britain national team basketball coach and co-founder of Movement Sports, presenting on Plan, Do, Review, the Movement Way. You can learn more or get access at summercoachingseries.com. And one note about this episode before we hop in. This conversation was recorded live at a coaching convention, so there may be a bit of background noise at times, but we did our best to edit the audio to bring you the highest quality possible. Now to part 1 of my conversation with Ben Freakley. Enjoy the episode. All right, coaches, really excited to welcome Ben Freakley to the podcast today. Ben is the VP of Performance and Wellbeing at University of Health and Performance and was formerly the head of mental performance for the Toronto Blue Jays. Ben, I would love if you started off and just shared with the listeners about your journey from soccer coach to mental performance coach and sports psychologist.
Luke, thanks for having me on. I love what you're doing. I wish podcasts would have been around when I got into college soccer. I think I can answer that question 2 ways. First, when I was going through my coaching education as a college soccer coach, every course that I went to, whether it be through United Soccer Coaches or the Federation, promoted this balanced approach to coaching to include technical, tactical, physical, and psychological. And I never found those experiences to be balanced enough, and always was curious, but never to the point that I pressed on it. And so that's one of the reasons that I've been on this journey is because I think uh, really player development, athlete development, human development must include um, knowledge and skills around psychological components that influence performance. And then on an even more personal level, in 2007, when I was coaching at Virginia Military Institute, I'd been a head coach for about 3 years at that point. My team was about 20 minutes away from beating Coastal Carolina for the first time in school history. And this is something that every recruit had been talked to about. The team was excited about. We had a great week of training, and we were winning 2-0. And in the second half, and by the conclusion of the game, bottom line, we lost 3-2 in double overtime. And our team picked up 2 red cards and 6 yellow cards. And I think that was a defining moment in my journey as a coach. And I to this day, I look back on that, and defensively, I felt we were prepared. Attacking wise, I felt we were prepared. But how do we manage the emotions and the stressors of the game? What do we do when we find ourselves winning, when it's actually happening? A state that our team had never been in before against that team. I wonder what my mannerisms on the sideline would have looked like that day. I can't help but think that I modeled everything but calmness and confidence. And if my team looked over to me, they probably saw a wreck. And that defeat still stays with me to this day. And I know for a fact it was a tipping point. I left VMI a couple years later. Went back to my alma mater at Georgia Southern, mainly because I wanted to be an Eagle again, but even more so, Georgia Southern offered a master's degree in sports psychology. And I thought this is a missing piece that I need as a coach and that I want to be able to truly offer my team, not just pop psychology, but actually evidence-based approaches to performance excellence. And so 2010, I went back to Georgia Southern, and I've been kind of in the deep end ever since. Changes as I was very comfortable with players calling me by my first name, and I even encouraged that if that's what they wanted to do. And I think that helped build rapport. And when rapport is built and there's a relationship, I think that really enhanced the trust. I think the next thing that I changed, I would just thematize this, is people are more willing to commit to what they help create. And so whenever possible, I invited players in on the decision-making process. And I like to give them choices, and I like to give them options. And I was learning at the time that the science behind this is that, one of the biggest ways to influence motivation is through autonomy and a sense of agency. What do you want this team to be about? What do you want this team to stand for? What should some of our objectives in training be this week? I think that people are a lot more willing to be held accountable to things if they've had a say in the process. I really restructured halftime talks. I've been a big fan forever now of 3 questions. What do we need to stop doing? What do we need to start doing? And what do we need to sustain? What's working? And I've found by bracketing halftime talks into those 3 questions, we really could get organized in a short amount of time and find some stability and intent in what we needed to look like in the second half.
That's awesome. And I love the halftime restructuring. I think that too many halftimes are totally wasted in a lot of sports by a lot of coaches, oftentimes getting highly emotional based on what just happened in the first half. And we miss an opportunity to sometimes just calm people down, but then also practically, look forward and improve what we're doing in the second half. And I love the structure you talked about: start, stop, and sustain. Just to have some sort of simple structure and framework as a coach, so that when you go into the locker room, you're not just winging it, right? Because I think that's just a recipe for, if I'm winging it here, I probably am going to be highly emotional or or scatterbrained. I don't know about you, but it's really easy to go into a locker room and all of a sudden you're just naming the 15 things that went wrong, and players can't retain that much information. It's just way too much, right? And it's like nobody wants to hear the 15 things they did wrong. And so to have, I think, a structure or framework like that is really powerful. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that on halftime. I think we could all take that and apply it.
Well, I think the other thing I should mention is I'd have my own list as well, but I would hold that until I heard some of the player responses. Sometimes they would come up with the same things that I was seeing. Sometimes that would be different.
Yeah.
Another big takeaway, probably the biggest, is I'm the product of a lot of '80s movies in sports, Hoosiers, for example, and other kind of movies that portray a coach as this uber motivator. And I adopted some of those tendencies early on in my coaching framework, and really was surprised doing my master's in sports psych to learn that, not everybody needs that. There are players that can benefit from some verbal persuasion from the coach. And there are other players that bring plenty of that on their own, and too much of that could cause them to get overly excited before they perform. So, different theories and models that I was learning about that influence players' level of excitement, strategies on that would help them dial that excitement up or back, depending on what they need. Those were things that I was much more mindful of in my coaching approach, especially around game day and leading up to it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think one of the most fascinating things is that you were taking these classes, doing this degree, and applying it at the same time. Like, that's the ideal situation, I think. Like, I'm learning all these things and boom, I'm going to practice at 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. Now I'm going to actually try to do these
Exactly.
things. That's such a cool, such a cool environment that you got to be a part of it. It's not like I'm just learning here. I'm actually learning and applying. And I want to circle back to one of the things you mentioned earlier. You said people commit to what they create. And I love that idea, and something that I found true in my own coaching thus far.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd love to know a little bit more. You mentioned just getting input from your athletes about different things. But were there any specific things that you would do every year with every team? Did you, at the beginning of the year, did you have a time when you kind of co-created your vision for the season? What was that process
Sure.
like? A little bit more about that co-creation.
So I don't think that getting to team meetings at the beginning of the year, I don't think that's a surprising concept. All coaches do that. So 2 areas, especially where players would, I would want their input, were around our values and our goals. So, values, what do we want to stand for, and what should that look like? And then behaviors, what do we want to actually achieve? It's easy in the beginning of the season before you start playing games, before players find out if they're in the starting 11 or not. It's very easy to get players to weigh in on what they would like to stand for, what they'd like to achieve. I think the skill is when coaches mindfully come back to those conversations and ask the team, how are we trending? I love the question, are our behaviors consistent with our values and goals? Are our behaviors consistent with our values and goals? You, Luke, for example, perfect example. You've driven up here. You live in Northwest Arkansas. You want to educate coaches. And I'm rolling up here at 9, and of all the booths that I'm looking around and seeing, yours is the most organized. And I walk up and I say, this guy takes his job very seriously. And so I think when you include your players or your people for that matter, whatever type of team you're on, in a conversation about what do we want to stand for, what behaviors represent our values, and also what does success look like, and then throwing some intellectual stimulation out there that is, okay, if we want to score X amount of goals this year, how do we turn that into a process? And then let's have defenders get into a small group and discuss that. Let's have midfielders get into a small group and discuss that. Let's have attackers get into a small group and discuss that. And instead of players thinking, well, it's completely up to the coach to provide the vision here, and he's going to tell us or she's going to tell us how to do everything. Those moments to me are living with what almost all coaches say, which is, I want you to take ownership in this team. Well, we have to give athletes an opportunity to do that. And we do that by asking those questions. What do you want this team to stand for? What does success look like? And what type of goals would we like to achieve this year? And then you get to ask even more fun questions on what would it look like me holding you accountable to that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, let's talk about that because that's where my mind was going next. And that's one of the big things as I've talked to a bunch of coaches and done it myself. Like accountability is such a buzzword, and it's easy as coaches or the older generation to complain about like kids don't want to be held accountable or whatever it might be. But what I've found to be true is that, I mean, you can't hold someone accountable to something they haven't committed to or agreed to, right? And I think that's the power in what you're talking about is actually sitting down and uh, co-creating your values, your goals. It gets that buy-in, and then that next piece is accountability, right? So you're saying you would ask them, how do you want me to hold you accountable?
Mm-hmm.
What were the responses typically like? And then how did you actually do it as the coach?
I think it's the accountability piece is not shying away from the discussion. So, typically you're having those meetings in a very stable environment. It's in a locker room or a classroom. Players are relaxed, but where they're exercising those behaviors is under pressure, daily at training or in games. So I think being intentional in game debriefs. And what I liked doing was not only debriefing tactical decisions that influenced game outcomes, but also values decisions that were made that did or did not look like our team values. So communication would go into that. Body language could go into that. Certainly individual effort could go into that. What type of behaviors were exhibited by substitutes would go into that. Was the team on time or early, or were we showing up just at game time? Like, these are the things that had to be consistently in front of the team. And then also, I think, empowering team leaders, whether it's formal captains or people that were leaders but not formally acknowledged as leaders, and asking for help with that. I remember one incident we had with some off-field issues, and we brought some of our team leaders in, 3 or 4 of them, and talked with them about our plan to deal with it, and asked them what they thought about that. And it could not have gone any better. I think they felt trusted, that they were brought in to that decision before we talked to the team. I think they liked that the coaching staff was willing to listen. And I felt that we had a group of players that in our absence and when college students are being college students, really wanted to uphold what we were standing for. And so those are the things that I really had not thought about or done prior to really diving deeper into sport and performance psych. Up to then, I took almost all the ownership on myself, solicited very little input from players, and was pretty directive in my approach. And those were a lot of things that I felt I needed to change.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think one of the things that is resonating with me is just that, like, it was like we mentioned, is this journey you had to go on first, really, to bring them to that place too, of you were growing and learning these things so that you could then pass it on to them. I'd be really curious to know, and maybe you can reflect a little bit back on your coaching experience, or maybe in your work since then. We started talking about some of that in-game situation that your team experienced, and you said that your own behavior in that
Hmm.
game uh, probably didn't help your
Mm-hmm.
cause, and if
Mm-hmm.
anything, probably contributed to the mental collapse almost that your team had.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd really be curious about two things. One, how did your in-game coaching change for you on this journey? And then the second part of it is maybe just kind of in general, like what should coaches be considering with in-game coaching
Mm-hmm.
and mental performance, the sports psychology thing, the sport psych side of things?
Sure. Uh, so I definitely remember having 2 or 3 alternative tactical plans preset for every game. Situations where we'd be winning, situations where we'd be behind or losing, changes that we could make that reflected both of those scenarios. That saved me time. Instead of trying to come up with that on the fly, I could look at 2 or 3 different options and make a decision. I think I did not do this at the time because I didn't know about it, but coaches are performers as well. And certainly they are their own team's sports psychologist. Not always good ones. And I'm speaking for myself on that part. And so I think anything that a coach can do that intentionally helps them regulate their own emotion. We had a phrase that we used quite a bit with the Blue Jays, and it's that elite performers can regulate their attention and their emotion under pressure in any circumstance. I'd say probably in sports psychology, if you boiled all of it down to the principles that sports psych teaches, it is emotional and attentional regulation strategies.
Can you say that again? That line that you
Elite
used
performers can regulate their attention and their emotion under pressure in any circumstance. By the time coaches are saying phrases like, don't worry about it, you got to believe in yourself, relax, take a deep breath, calm down, players are past the tipping point at that. And I overuse the phrase, it's not a skill unless it holds up under pressure. And we constantly train technique and tactics because we want players to be able to demonstrate technical proficiency under pressure, and we want players to execute a tactical game plan under pressure. It should not be any different for emotional and attentional regulation skills. Those should be trained as well. So whether it is a coach, and again, these would be redos for me, 3 to 5 minutes of breathing. I work with a pro coach right now, and we work on his own regulation strategies. What can he do prior to game time that is going to allow him to be present and to work his own process for managing a game start to finish. So I really think that starts with learning how to dial it back, being extremely self-aware of when our heart rate starts to rise, when our mind is doing what our minds love to do, which is go to the past. Why did that happen? Or go to the future. I hope this doesn't happen. That can be a nice mixture of depression and anxiety, both at the same time. And we have to learn how to really land in the moment and quiet our eye on what we're actually seeing. Be aware of experiences like what we're seeing in the past that could influence our decisions. And being mindful that not all thoughts are facts. And a variety of thoughts will go into our minds as we are coaching games. And we have to learn how to filter which ones are fear and anxiety or dwelling on the past, and which ones really add value to what could inform the way we communicate with players. So goal setting is certainly an attentional regulation strategy. Task relevant self-talk is an attentional regulation strategy. Mindfulness and breath work are great emotional regulation strategies. And there's some really cool things that we can play around with that influence our covert behaviors, like learning how to unhook from consistent negative thoughts, and also overt behaviors like just standing still, kind of stoically, in moments of uncertainty that might send a message to the team. I believe, I trust, we've been here before. We're okay. Again, none of these things I knew about or knew how to employ 10 or 15 years ago, but things that I'm convinced now can really influence performance outcomes, stronger relationships, and better overall mental health and performance.
Coaches, thanks for listening to this episode. I'll be back next week with part 2 of my conversation with Ben. As always, if you enjoyed the episode and you want to grab a copy of the free podcast notes, go to cuttingedgecoach.com/podcast to download a free PDF. I've got 3 takeaways from this episode. Number 1 is a quote Ben shared. People are more willing to commit to what they help create. Let your players have a voice in creating the experience. Number 2 is Ben's 3 questions for your halftime talk. Number 1, what do we need to stop doing? Number 2, what do we need to start doing? And number 3, what do we need to sustain? I think this is a really simple yet effective way to structure our halftime talks. And number 3 is Ben's quote, elite performers can regulate their attention and their emotion under pressure in any circumstance. I know most of us don't coach at an elite level, but it still applies to us at our level. To be our best, we must regulate our attention and emotion under pressure and help our athletes do the same. And hey, don't forget to check out summercoachingseries.com to learn more or sign up for the 2022 Summer Coaching Series. You can get access to all the previous sessions and all the upcoming sessions. That's summercoachingseries.com. I hope to see you this summer. Thanks for listening to the podcast.